Welcome to Coffee and a Weather Map with Jeff. It is July 15th, 2025. And as we look into the current conditions around the area, do this a little bit differently since so much of this is related. We have two fronts. Looking at the surface map, the northern one runs basically out of Quebec, then runs along the Canadian border, right around Sault Ste. Marie and across Lake Superior into northern Minnesota, and then back into northern Wyoming. And then that continues on into northern Oregon. This lines up very well with the jet stream that's currently over the region, or the whole continent, pretty much going from west to east. There is an area of low pressure that's into the coming out of British Columbia, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Otherwise, then the southern front runs from New England down the coast into the mid-Atlantic states, crossing the going along the Mason-Dixon line, and then through the Ohio River Valley into central Kansas. And that also lines up with what's going on. That's kind of where the main extent of the upper air ridge is, and the southernmost extent of the jet stream just to the north. And if you don't realize, the jet stream is driven by temperature differences. And the reason it's so far north, at least at this time of the year, we've been fairly warm across most of the country, and it's cold up in northern Canada. So where the two air masses collide, you tend to have a river of wind, even up at 20,000 feet, between 15 and 20,000 feet, where the 500 millibar layer or level exists. So anyways, as we take a look at where all those things are, we're going to go quickly over to radar scope. And you can kind of see where those fronts are all set up as we noted earlier on the map. And you can kind of dress, here's the one, and you've got a group of showers and thunderstorms with little lows on them every so often. There's one up around here. And then the main one's way up north. And then there's a second one, which goes roughly about like this. And you can see there's showers and thunderstorms on here. When I got up this morning, there were still some, in fact, there still is a few flood warnings down in that area. One of the things that does not go along with this whole idea of the fronts and the jet stream is one down here in South Texas. And we'll quickly take a look at that. This area there's actually a trough of low pressure. Put my drawing tool back on. It kind of goes like this. It's kind of leftover dynamics and all this moisture, and then the uplift that you get and I discussed that a little bit the other day. There's the Balcones front, kind of right along that general area. So all this warm, moist air is just being lifted, and then the trough of low pressure tends to lift things as well. And so we've just been getting all of these showers and thunderstorms over basically the same area. And I see today, or this morning, recently, then, as we go through, that there's been a new precipitation discussion by WPC for South Central Texas. Although it's a low confidence flash flooding scenario with localized 2 to 3 inch amounts on top of the sensitive grounds, which there's been a lot of rain in that area. So, and then the one other place where all this doesn't fit the fronts and jet stream is this thing right here. This is known as 93L, or Invest 93L. And that is our newest tropical disturbance. There is some rotation. Let's see if we can see it on the radar here this morning. Yeah, just a little bit of rotation in there. I could see it on the satellite. There's a bit of a rotation in there. There's not as much, it's more like a lot of it's mid-level. There is some low-level. They're not synced up. So it's still kind of getting its act together. And we'll discuss more of that here in just a minute as well. Oh, satellite. Always got to see the satellite. And you can kind of see that also fitting across there with the upper air where most of the clouds and radar echoes are, with a lot of the stuff associated with the jet stream or the fronts. And so we'll just quickly change that over from the RAP analysis to the mean sea level pressures. You can kind of see where all those lows are and the troughs of low pressure. Let's get rid of that. Okay. Oh, and you can see the spin down there off the Florida coast, or just coming onto the Florida coast from 93L. We'll take a quick look at the watch, warning, and advisory map, and just do it really quickly there. Heat advisory in New England, as well as an air quality alert in northern New York and part of Vermont. That also includes southeastern lower Michigan, around the Chicago area, and Minnesota. Minnesota's got the smoke from the fires, and the smoke from the fires a couple days ago that blanketed the upper Great Lakes is now over into New England. And there's still a little bit of lingering pollutants around, probably an ozone alert for the Chicago area. Down the mid-Atlantic, we still have a flood watch going with all that rain that's been falling. And if you look closely, the red and greens, there are some flash flood watches or warnings and some flood warnings on some of the rivers. You got heat advisories down along the Gulf Coast, and we continue to have that area in hill country with a flood watch going. We have river flood warnings, as well as flood advisories and flash flood warnings across the area as well. And then out west, this particular critical fire weather conditions. Okay, it is a red flag warning. The shades of pink are can be a little subtle at times. Otherwise, we have heat advisories up and down the coast. We have a wind advisory, it looks like, wind advisory in the mountains, as well as out in eastern Montana. And then what is this green down here? We will see. Oh, they have a flash flood watch, and we will talk a little bit more about that, but yeah, monsoonal moisture getting into southern Arizona. All right, over to SPC to take a look at the outlooks. That 500 millibar low that we talked about coming down out of British Columbia today is going to spread across into the northern plains, and it produces the slight risk to the enhanced risk that's there. It stretches, the slight risk stretches from the upper Great Lakes, Lake Superior specifically, down into the central plains, where there is an enhanced risk there in Nebraska, and then a little bit back behind into Wyoming with the slight risk and the marginal. On day 2, that area continues to move eastward. So we have at least right now, marginal area that stretches from the lower peninsula of Michigan all the way back into Colorado, with a slight risk around Wisconsin and Illinois. Would not be surprised if this gets upgraded by tomorrow for at least a larger area of slight as they get a better handle on what's going on. I was a little surprised with this, but there are no severe weather areas, thunderstorms expected, at least on Thursday, but there is a very wide swath of general thunderstorms across the region. A lot of that has to do with the fronts that are starting to wash out as they get further south. The jet stream is starting to pull off to the north with that little bit of energy in the winds, and that pulls back up into Canada. But there is a possibility that there could be a few areas around here that are going to get upgraded, at least to marginal by tomorrow, when it becomes day 2. And who knows, we'll see what happens as we get closer to Thursday. All right, going through the WPC excessive rain outlook. This one's a little bit busier. We are on, yes, day 1 here. I think I actually have, no, I don't. We'll take a look at the excessive rain outlook now. This is day 1 here. Move the map a little bit more centered and a little bit more zoomed in. You can see this pretty much follows with what SPC also had with the slight to or marginal to slight area there in the northern part of the U.S., stretching from the plains and eastern and western Montana all the way back over to the upper Great Lakes. And that area, just like with SPC, with the slight risk, they also have a slight risk in that area for that. Then a little bit further south, you also have that other front right around where it's been raining a lot in Virginia. Well, that's where the slight risk is, as well as the marginal that follows the front out through the Ohio Valley and into Missouri and northern Arkansas. You've got the monsoonal moisture out in Arizona, and then the Texas moisture convergence in the area over the hill country that continues to get hit. And then you have 93L down there in Florida. All right, day 2. And as I said before, with SPC, as the systems move to the east, we start to see everything kind of lining up. We get a little bit further on with Michigan having a marginal all the way back to Colorado and a little bit up the Front Range. The slight risk, though, goes from Wisconsin over northern Illinois and then out into Kansas, all along that next front and the southernmost extent of that area low pressure in the jet stream. Of course, we also have whatever is left that's moved up from Virginia into central Pennsylvania and eastern Ohio. It does look like Texas should start to, I wouldn't say dry out necessarily, but not get any more rain, at least for the time being. The Gulf Coast, all the way from Florida to Louisiana, will have the effects of 93L, and who knows, maybe it'll be Dexter by this time for day 2, which is the 16th into the morning of the 17th. And then we have the monsoonal moisture in Arizona and New Mexico. And day 3, as that front continues to wash out and continue and stretches from New England all the way back into Arizona with that monsoonal moisture, that is one place to watch. But then the other place is 93L. Most of the models take it up into Louisiana, so there is a slight risk in the Louisiana and southern Mississippi associated with that. I did talk about 93L, and there it is, a 40% chance of development. Main issue, regardless of development, is the heavy rain. And we've already touched on that with the excessive rain outlook. All right, that leads us to our local forecasts. So for northern Michigan, we have today mainly in the 80s to the mid 90s across the region. Wednesday, well, thunderstorms, temperatures start to cool off. We start getting part of that front to start pushing farther south. Quite a wide range, with 71 for the lows, which would be up near Sault Ste. Marie, to 89, which would be inland and down in the southeast corner of the forecast area. And then Thursday, looks like we were just in the mid 60s to mid 70s. And so I did save this for today. Here is the NBM numbers for the region of northern Michigan to show you on the map. Temperature ranges can only tell you so much, but I wanted to show this a little bit. So you got the mid 80s up in Sault Ste. Marie, and then you get further south, and then you're in that 90s and 89 to 90s area. That northeast lower can tend to get fairly warm, so that's in the 90s in that area up there, just because of the fact that the winds are out of the southwest and it kind of downslopes into there. As we look at tonight, or I mean, sorry, tomorrow, for Wednesday for the Wednesday highs, I was talking about how the temperatures are how they're going to range, and I'll take a quick look back there, 71 to 89. So we will look at that. So 71 is probably up there by Whitefish Point, and along Lake Superior is also, not quite to Manistee in the Upper Peninsula. It gradually goes warmer as you go off to the southwest. So our upper 80s are down by Gladwin, Skidway Lake, that general area. One thing I wanted to note, which I circled in red, is Marquette's high temperature for tomorrow will be 57 degrees, probably at north wind coming right off of Lake Superior. And its temperature right now is probably not too much further either side of 60, depending on the day. All right, and then for Thursday, the high temperatures, as we saw the range, 67 up there by Sault Ste. Marie, probably even a few lower 60s. You see Marquette at 64. Getting further south, then that plateau of 1,000 to 1,200 feet plus that stretches there across northern Michigan from roughly Cadillac up through Gaylord. Temperatures there will probably just be below 70, since it tends to be a little chillier at that area. The lower places and then along the lakes, you'd expect the warmer temperatures, as the water temperatures are starting to warm up closer to 70 degrees across the area. And so we were seeing mid 70s down by Gladwin. All right. So that's for northern Michigan. And then for South Texas, they're still concerned about the tropical outlook, just so that you know what's going on. But that is going to be for another day. Today, though, temperatures pretty much is what South Texas has been having and is expected most of the time. Upper 80s along the coast to around 100 out in the brush country. Wednesday and Thursday are much the same. If we take a look at the 5-day outlook, 91 to 103. Thursday, 90 to 103. The next chance for rain, and for part of that, looks like it is across the Victoria Crossroads, so up near Victoria, and that is a 20% chance. So not a whole lot is expected. Dry conditions prevailing through most of the week. And I will say that this temperature map will look a lot, or tomorrow's temperature map will look a lot like today's, and the day after that, as we've seen all the temperatures. Okay, so that wraps it up. So go out and have a great day.